What is up, everybody? This is our last video, last dead puzzle of the year. I know you're sad. I'm sorry to break the news to you, but this is it. This is 8.3 human rights violations. If you look at your review sheet, I did not do a video on 8.2. You should have that in the Google Slides that you did. So if you want to fill that in at some point, that would be awesome. But this is human rights violations. Specifically, we're looking at the 20th century. 20th century means 1900s. Not the most uplifting stuff today as we wrap up on a very sad note just being done. Also looking at issues of human rights. So here's the deal, just to kind of give us a framework or set it up. After World War II, with the Holocaust, with all these atrocities that went on during World War II, killing innocent people, atomic bombs, genocides, awful stuff. The United Nations is formed. All right. So the United Nations is an international peacekeeping organization. It replaced the League of Nations. And one part of the United Nations that they create almost right off the bat is called the UN Declaration of Human Rights. It is a way to declare human rights. And in this case, any country that joins the United Nations is expected to sign off on this Declaration of Human Rights. And there are like 30 different declaration or different pieces in it. Right to speech, right to press, right to freedom of religion, a lot of the stuff that come from the Enlightenment, if we want to go all the way back to one of our first units, just a lot of the freedoms and things it should entail. So it guarantees these rights. And the goal of doing this is to avoid human rights violations. Again, all of these issues from the totalitarian dictators of the 1930s and then the wars, how can we avoid this in the future? And if these human rights are being violated in terms of a genocide or human rights, the UN will step in and do it. However, it doesn't always work that way. So we have a couple different places. I'm going to bounce around the world here real quick. We'll do more stuff in class on each of these. But one example is Cambodia. Cambodia, for those that don't know, is south of China. It is located right here. It's right next to Vietnam. And while the Vietnam War is going on, if you remember Ho Chi Minh, communism versus democracy, Cambodia kind of gets caught up in this. And Cambodia has a dictator who is their leader. His name is Pol Pot. Kind of an interesting name. This is him right here. He looks like a nice, innocent guy, but he's a really bad dude. He has a communist group that he is part of. So he is communist. The U.S. doesn't like him. You can imagine in the 1970s with the domino theory and the belief in the Cold War and all this stuff. He leads a group called the Khmer Rouge. The ethnic group is Khmer. Rouge means red. Red is communist. That's where the name comes from. And his goal is to go back to old school ways. Let's be anti-Western. No modern technology, no modern ideas, no Western books. You're not reading Grapes of Wrath or Lord of the Flies or anything like that. That is banned in Cambodia under his rule. He wants to return back to when Cambodia was pure, and he wants to go back to an agrarian or farming culture. So no doctors, no lawyers, no schools. We want to go back and just have everyone be a farmer again. Really, really kind of weird and bizarre. But things like you weren't allowed to wear glasses. If you wore glasses in Pol Pot's Cambodia, you would be arrested and killed. And they actually tracked a lot of the deaths. They took pictures of them, unlike the Holocaust where they try and hide it. They actually took pictures. They kept track of it. So somewhere between 1.5 and 3 million people died. It is a small country. It's just right here. And that's an insane number of people. There is what is known as the killing fields. They would take people out to these certain areas and kill them and execute them, torture them. Really, really awful stuff. That's in the 1970s. And the U.S. and the UN didn't do a very good job of stopping that until way after it was done. Another example is Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia is right here. It was this region right here. It's now broken up into a bunch of countries. But the leader of that area was named Slobodan Milosevic. He was the president. He was Serbian. So if you remember, this area down here is called the Balkans. It's where Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. There was nationalism, a lot of pride. And he leads a genocide as well. So I hate to go through this so fast, but he is a Serbian, and the people in this region, which is very similar to right before World War I with the Archduke being assassinated, like I said, he's going to lead a genocide against people. The U.S. and the UN get involved in this one. Thousands of people died. Again, a horrible example, another example of some horrible things. We also have the Rwandan genocide, which is 1994. It's located right here in Central Africa. There's two ethnic groups. One are called the Hutus. They are the majority. The other are called the Tutsis. They are the minority. And the Hutus lead a genocide against the Tutsis. It only lasts a couple months. This genocide is a little bit different. This is carried out by the government. This one's carried out by the government as well. A lot of torture. This is carried out just by everyday citizens for the most part. They're given machetes. They go into their neighbors' homes. They slaughter people. and a really, really awful genocide in 1994 that only lasted a couple months. 1 million people died. Again, very lack of the UN. Again, coming back to this, the UN should be doing something. In Rwanda, they didn't. They pulled out all their soldiers and kind of let it happen. Really an awful example as well. Two others here. We have in Chile, a guy by the name of General Augusto Pinochet. He was the leader of Chile in the 1970s. He is anti-communist. Again, this is during the Cold War. The U.S. doesn't like communists, so we support this guy as Americans. They gave money to this guy. They support him. But just because you're anti-communist doesn't make you democratic. So he is a strict totalitarian ruler. He is known for torturing, executing, making people disappear. It was common in a lot of Latin American countries in the 1970s and 80s that the government would just make people disappear. So one day you're sleeping, your brother, sister, dad, mom get pulled out of bed by the government, and you never see them again. There's no word of what happened to them. They just disappear. And that is very common, especially in Chile at the time, where anybody who is suspected of being communist is going to, or anyone who is really a threat to this guy's power is going to disappear. And he's going to be in charge until the 1980s. And again, this is where we get tricky. Like the U.S. is supporting governments that are not communist or against communism, but at the same time, like, are you supporting somebody who is kind of an evil dictator? And this is what the U.S. gets involved in. So with all of these things, all these bad things. So again, we got Chile, we got Rwanda, we got Yugoslavia, we got Cambodia, 4 different genocides. We also have people protesting some awful stuff, people who are focused on these human rights. And just 2 examples that come up. And this is, the Regents loves asking these questions about this, like really usually right at the end. One is a group of people called the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo. This was in Argentina, and Argentina, which is right next to Chile, had a very similar situation in the 70s and 80s where a corrupt government, that government was making people disappear. And these Mothers of Plaza de Mayo started going out and protesting. So they were women, moms, that's the name, who were going out in the streets and protesting, something that men couldn't do because they would disappear. But because of the Argentinian culture and the respect for grandmothers and mothers as being the matriarch of the family, these women were able to protest. It took a lot of bravery and courage, and these women went out and protested, demanding that the people who disappeared, who made people disappear, were held accountable to return people who maybe were still alive. And they held protests daily. It was like a really brought a lot of attention to the corruption that was going on in Argentina. And one other, who is a religious figure, you may have heard of her. Her name is Mother Teresa. She was a not very big religious figure in the 80s and 90s. She protested the inequality in the world, poverty in the world. She spent most of her time in India, which during the 70s and 80s went through a lot of impoverished people. So just an example. There's a lot. So that's kind of the wrap up here. There's a lot of terms and a lot of people in here, and I'm bouncing around quick so we can wrap this up and get through it. We'll spend more time in class going over some of these, but that's what I got. That's the end. This is the last one. You will not have to watch another Edpuzzle in here. So I hope you're excited about that. And if you got any questions, as always, you can write it down, but I'm sure you don't. But whatever, just let me know. All right. Out.